the his campaign out there, like the most celebrated camping trip in U.S. history with John Muir, led to a number of things. It really just kicked in for him, and that was the Reclamation Act and Antiquities Act, saying, folks, these places are too beautiful. They are a resource in of itself. Let's just preserve these places. We can visit them, but leave no trace. And that's the origins of our national parks.
For those of us who all we have is that tap water, that's the only source of water, that's kind of what we're shooting for, is to where everyone, regardless of your socioeconomic background, can have some safe, clean water to be in, whether it's drinking it or swimming in it, etc.
Congress is in charge of providing for the common defense and the welfare of the American people. All right, that's in the Constitution.
Warning, may contain the Niagara Falls, lead poisoning, history lessons, waveforms, and/or peanuts. I am Woodstock.
Welcome to the show, man. It's been a long time since we've been able to sit down and talk to my in-house geologist.
Yeah. No, we've had a lot of really good conversations since last time that we probably should have had on the mic.
We definitely need to have a microphone constantly floating around us. The future's now. At a minimum,
remember on the Chappelle Show, the home stenographer skit?
I've never seen that.
The little
one.
midget on his backpack. It's a backpack midget home stenographer. So whenever you get in arguments with your spouse or your friend, like, no, pull back the record. And it's a little midget back there typing up everything you say.
We need one of those.
Yes.
I don't think that's PC though.
No, probably not.
Unfortunately not.
No.
I don't think much of my show is PC though. I don't know. It's a nice 50-50 split. Sometimes I feel like I'm Mr. Rogers and other times I feel like I'm more of the, I don't know.
It's all been tasteful.
Just bro.
It's all been tasteful. I haven't heard any tackiness, right? Yeah, it's been all fun episodes, Yeah. No, beautiful day out there, dude. You looking forward to playing some Frisbee golf today?
Ooh, I've never played Frisbee golf. Really? It's time to do it.
Dude,
I'll be surprised when I win my very first try.
Well, stranger to playing Beersby, and I can throw a pretty damn good Frisbee, dude. I love playing Frisbee. But you go out there on that Frisbee golf course with Rustin and them, it's a different game, dude. I'm not that good at it.
I'm excited now.
It's fun, dude. It's fun. Like it's challenging. It's like a real whimsical course out there. And it's like, think about putt golf for kiddos, all the cool little designs and stuff like that. But for adults, and you go out there and you can walk around drinking beer, and there's college kids out there token up here and there and stuff. It's a pretty cool little whimsical course. It's fun.
Very nice.
It's long. It's like they have a short, maybe like 8 holes or 9 holes, and then 18 holes full length. It's pretty fucking fun, dude.
All I heard was beer. I'm in.
Yes. No, it's gonna be good.
So it's been a while since we've spoken. Last time we had you on the mic, we touched on quite a bit of stuff, but what I wanted to delve back into a little bit was more of what your expertise is, which is, well, you tell us, what is your expertise? And let's dive into it there.
Yeah, I always say that my own mom doesn't know what I do for a living because it's kind of out there. Not a lot of folks have much experience with it. But yeah, so I'm a scientist. I'm a geologist. I'm I wear many hats, right? I'm a cartographer and a geospatial analyst. So I do a lot of mapping, all things geographical, right? I'm a geologist. I, characterize subsurface conditions, and I'm also a data analyst. A lot of what I do is information sciences, right? But of all those hats that I wear, I'm an environmental consultant at the end of the day, right? That's what pays the bills, right? So I'd love to be in academia, but what pays the bills is being a consultant, right? And so that's all environmental hydrogeology, basically. So I investigate. Basically, people pay me to get to the bottom of shit, right? So if they pay me to either A, unfuck what they've done to the environment, or B, prevent them from fucking up the environment.
Very nice.
Makes sense, right? And so there's a lot of like really niche types of scientists that do what we do in environmental consulting. I've kind of made a name for myself and being kind of a jack of all trades, and it's lent itself to getting into some really cool different types of project work over the years. It's pretty freaking fun.
So when I read a headline and I barely understand what it's talking about how the current administration is rolling back some, I guess, water guidelines that the Trump administration had taken away, that's all in your wheelhouse. Like you're tied really into that. Because I don't really know the details. All I know that the environmentalists were very happy, and certain corporations were not happy about them rolling it back in. And I imagine you're on the side of the Biden administration on this one.
Most of them, yeah. On most things. There's quite a few things he's gotten wrong, but yeah, like one of the big transitions from Obama to Trump was, rolling back a lot of those environmental regulations that are quite important to the health and safety of Americans, right?
Do you have specifics on some of those, so some of us laymen can actually understand what those are all about?
Oh yeah. I think one of the ones that directly impacted me the most was the Trump administration rolled back a lot of the Clean Water Act provisions that either characterized what types of waters are jurisdictional, meaning that the government can regulate. In order to disturb, you would have to get some kind of a permitting process, and then B, rolling back regulations on what you can and cannot basically dump into rivers, right? So they just kind of cut it back wide open on how, you can push different types of effluent into our rivers. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anybody. It all gets diluted. You'll be fine, which is not at all the case. It was just a way for, folks to have more profit. Costs money to not do things the right way. Right.
And this is actual materials that they're pushing into the water systems that do have a health effect. And they knew this, and they just, is it like the whole Chevron thing? They had the data and just completely ignore it?
Yeah. And a lot of it is, when it comes to, like, in general, poison, right? When you think about the word poison, it's all about the dosage, right? So
the parts per million.
Yeah. It's all about the dosage. Anything's poison if you put enough of it in you, right? So it's all about the push and shove, the give and take of what we find acceptable to release into the environment, right? And so they were very, the Trump administration was very relaxed on how much you can dump into it, right? And this is everything from, your basic community wastewater treatment plants, right? How much, what are the levels of, contamination that you can dump into the river after you clean it up, right? And so they found a very different acceptable level of those contaminations, right?
So I imagine the people who are in support of those types of, rolling that back, they would argue that there's a balance in life. You have to have a economic stability in your nation, and putting all of these regulations in place is increasing all of these inefficiencies, and it's going to make costs go up, which is going to add to inflation, et cetera. And you need to have a balance. So how do we as a people really determine where that line is? Because if you leave it to, a scientist that his only job in life, he's dedicated his life to this one specific thing, I think we can all agree that typically they're going to kind of maybe overblow it to make themselves, seem more important. We've seen that through history a lot of times.
Yeah.
How do we know where that balance is when we're talking about where we're throwing our votes? Is it really moving the dial? The things that Trump pulled back, is that really increasing our health costs, or is it minuscule?
Yeah, no, great question. It really isn't that complicated. Because there are quite a few checks and balances at every level in our system to prevent it ever coming down to just one scientist making the rules, right? These processes have been developed over decades and decades, and you don't have environmental regulations being put in place over just one guy's, opinion, or one little group's, right? There's a process. It goes, up the chain, and it goes, for approval, it gets peer reviewed, and it goes up to whether it's the state or the EPA or another, jurisdiction. They post draft what they might, like, for example, maximum concentration levels, MCLs, of what they find to be, adequate in terms of what you can and cannot release into the environment. And when they release those draft regulations, those go out for public review, public comment, and they have to address every single one of those public comments. It's a process. So it really comes down to, the experts are experts for a reason. They know what they're doing, and they know what is out there, making us sick and harming us. They review these things at the toxicological level, and the impacts on our bodies and our society. And they're normally pretty point on. And the dissidents to that are who? Corporations trying to make profit, right? And when we talk about, that digging into profits, it's not on the scale of inflation. It's on the scale of how much profit those shareholders in the C-suite folks are going to make. That's it, right? I'm not aware of too many environmental regulations that are, dooming an entire industry or causing massive inflation that, that don't make sense, right? There's not a lot of that out there. Most of them are pretty darn reasonable. Now, there are a ton, and we'll talk about this. There are a ton of regulations that are in place that are simply there due to lobbyists, right? And those are what give, the modern regulatory environment a bad name. But it for the most part, it comes down to, are we going to check capitalism or not? And if we are, to what degree do we find that acceptable, right? Obviously, we can't just shut everything down and go back to freaking, nomad tribalism. We need technology. We need these things. But and the way I always look at it is, if your company can't turn a profit without killing people downstream with cancer, then fuck your company. Right. Yeah. That's all it comes down to. That's a good way to put it. Like if you're incapable, if you whine and say, oh, I can't turn a profit with these regulations. Well, these regulations, they're only there to prevent people downstream from dying of cancer. And so if your company can't figure out a way to turn a profit within those constraints, then you don't need to be in that business, period. Because others are doing it. Others are doing it just fine. So you're in the wrong business, buddy.
Simple way to put it. Right. Simple way to put it. You can't really argue with that. So let's go over a little bit of the history of because when was it that we actually started giving a shit about our water? Because I imagine in history for millennia, we never had any regulation. We were all just taking shits in the river, and we were dying of dysentery and all that. We eventually learned how to boil water, etc. But when did we get to a point, at least in the United States, obviously each country is going to be different, but we've kind of made a shift to where we need to protect the waterways so the lowest common denominator in the nation can drink it safely directly from the tap. Lots of places you have to sit there and boil your water or filter it in order to have clean drinking water. And, rich people still do. I mean, I'm building homes now and we have reverse osmosis systems, which are fantastic if you can find enough water and pay for it. But for those of us who all we have is that tap water, that's the only source of water, that's kind of what we're shooting for, is to where everyone, regardless of your socioeconomic background, can have some safe, clean water to be in, whether it's drinking it or swimming in it, etc. When did we start caring about that? Very
insightful of you to start off with. Your first statement was, when asking when did this all start, was talking about shitting in rivers. That's really the origins of the whole our interactions with the environment and the feedback system. And when we first started, noticing that interaction and how it impacted us, right, was us taking shits and our horses and cattle taking shits, right? So when we go back, when everyone was, spread out in small little tribes before we started congregating in post-agricultural, in larger communities, the first real environmental issues mankind ever had was shit in the streets, right? Which would then get into the water well or our water systems, whatever, right? So we would have, our streets would literally be mud piles of shit. People would shit in a bucket in their house, throw it out the window into the street. The horses would be going down the street. They would shit in the street. And no one would take it upon themselves to clean that shit up. Many folks would have, the initiative to try to keep their own shit away from their own house and their own house tidy. But when it came to the public land on the main streets going through a village, shit added up in the street, and there was no one in charge to do that. Right. And so the first real instance of, mankind paying attention to this was when you started having, and this was kind of all around the world at the same time as we were growing, kingdoms saying, hey, I don't like our streets full of shit. Let's make some of those people over there in charge it. Hey, you there, you're now the shit scooper. You take care of all this shit. Right. And that was really the first time where anyone with any kind of authority started doing something about it. Right. So yeah, very insightful of you to start talking about our literal shit. Right. And
shit storm that we are currently in.
Yep.
Or used to be in. We're doing pretty good now, I'd say.
Yeah, no, it's that's in the line of work that I do. That's really what most interests me. Growing up, I very much was always interested in natural phenomena, right? Characterizing, Mother Nature, the wonders of nature. And then throughout my education, I started becoming very interested in, the anthropogenic portion of that, right? Because it's a feedback system. We have this earth, and then we impact it in certain ways, right? And then that impact to the earth always comes back to us in one way or another, right? And so I started getting really, really interested in that throughout my education, and then into my, my career. And so, I've kind of thought about this on how to kind of best, discuss the origins of environmental degradation, what led to eventual regulations, right, in our modern regulatory environment, right. And so, as we discussed, it started off really with just shit in our streets, right. And then if we want to, jump to modern, let's start with in America, right. A lot of our environmental problems started with our philosophy of manifest destiny. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit. Yeah.
It was us saying, we don't only have the opportunity to expand out west across the Americas, and we don't only have this really cool experience of settling the West, but it is our duty. It is our destiny. It is God telling us we must go out and control the West, both the peoples and the lands, right? And that was really when we started getting in trouble, right? Building dams, killing off wildlife, totally the thing about the mining that took place, right? We really messed up a lot pretty quick. Yeah. This is in the 1700s, early 1800s, right? And that's really the origin story on at least on the American front of where we started really messing stuff up. And then if we start talking about environmentalism at its core, a lot of that will go back to Henry David Thoreau, which I think actually last time we spoke, I let you borrow that book, Walden. Oh yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Walden Pond, right, which was Thoreau was a naturalist and what's known as a transcendentalist at the time. A philosophy that sounds pretty hokey now, but he was famous for writing Walden Pond, where he wanted to escape city life and industry, and he went out to his family's kind of lake house out there to ponder things, right? And he recognized that we are probably better off in small communities as opposed to these large industrialized cities. He was seeing for the first time in the, as we're starting to industrialize the issues that we have, just by the nature of how many people are getting sick from it, right? It's really that simple, right? And so this idea of transcendentalism at the time was very much a unique American philosophy of questioning, what are we doing here? What's the best way to live? And these folks were kind of advocates of independence and self-sufficiency, meaning it's probably best we live in little small communities around and not these congregated large industrialized areas. And it was very much a rebuke on modern society and that we must adhere to cultural norms. Hey, everybody get in line, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, it's not always best for us, right? And so he was one of the first folks to really start, pondering and documenting the continuity between man and nature. That book really kind of dove in deep on our relationship with nature, because again, it's very much a feedback loop. We depend on it, and anytime that we mess it up, it's going to come back to bite us in the butt, right? So if we go back and look at the early 1800s, one of the first authors that kind of took it a step further was Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was another transcendentalist and author that wrote a book simply called Nature, right? And he very much elaborated on the role that nature plays on our overall well-being as individuals and as society, right? And 1800s, we saw manifest destiny, we saw industrialization, and a lot happened without many folks at all really taking the time to question what the hell are we doing here with all this, right? What are the impacts? It was just, let's grow for the sake of growth. This is amazing technology, innovation. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. But, I'm sure a lot of poor folks at the time were thinking, yeah, this kind of sucks for us at the moment. But, not a lot of folks kind of pondering it at the philosophical level, or certainly not documenting it, right? But by the time we get into the late 1800s is when folks now all of a sudden have the luxury of taking a step back and considering stuff, right? And
all of the technology that we've been building, the wealth that we've been putting together now gives us enough time to sit back and think, all right, yeah, we can do this. We've done a good job of pushing forward at all costs, but what are the costs? Yep. What do we do to ourselves now?
Bingo. What are the costs, right? And what does it mean to go out west and dam up every single river? For, what does it mean to go and destroy any mountain or natural resource for the sake of capitalism, mining, right? We need to do this stuff, but to what degree and how should we be doing it? This is when people really started recognizing this. And
it's like, one thing I've been trying to do with myself is think generationally instead of just my life. It's, you're going to go and you're going to dam up that river, right? And what's that going to do for our generation, my child's generation? Great. It's going to give us all these luxuries and wealth. But what about, 10 generations down?
Yeah. Yep. There's a phrase called no free lunch. No such thing as a free lunch, right? If we are, burning through resources or degrading resources, there's a price for it, right? And if right now the benefits of it is growth and innovation and monetary value for this generation, well, we might all benefit from it. Maybe our kiddos do, but will our grandkids? Someone's going to pay the price.
And in some cases, I think it is sustainable, and it's just, I think, a newer concept within the last 100, 200 years of, all right, is this actually sustainable? That's focused towards the ones that are and start mitigating the ones that aren't.
Yeah. No, a great example is forestry, right? Forestry, it's, man, we can't go and just chop down every tree. We got to use the trees. What are we going to do? Right. Well, we manage the forest, right? In the late 1800s, there was a guy, Gifford Pinchot, that was very much studying what they had to do in Europe, because we were kind of behind the game in terms of the concept of managing forests. Europe was very much more dense. They had some great old growth forests, and they just plowed through all of them all. I mean, they chopped them all down, right? And they had to figure out pretty quick, hey, there's a lot of us living in a more finite space, and if we just chop down every tree and don't manage it, we're kind of hosed, right? So he was studying that and brought that over here, and really he's kind of known as the father of national forests over here, and he kind of really brought that to light. And
said Pinchot?
Yeah, Gifford Pinchot. And he got us on the path of managing our forestry to where we don't just chop everything down and don't replant, right? But that's a great example of, we got to do something. We need these resources, but we can do it in a responsible manner that generations down the line will benefit on top of us, right? Another great guy from the late 1800s, which was my favorite time period in terms of how we got to where we are these days, in terms of our relationship with Mother Nature, was a gentleman by the name of John Muir. You ever heard of him? You ever heard of Muir Woods out in California?
Yeah.
Named after John Muir. He's a super cool, old skinny guy, big long beard that just did nothing but walk around with a hiking pole out west and just loved Mother Nature out there.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Oh, he was cool, man. He was one of my heroes. Awesome guy. And he was kind of one of the first that got involved in what we would consider, environmental activism, right? The city of San Francisco didn't have a lot of drinking water. They were growing. The ephemeral streams out there provide water some parts of the year, but they were running out of clean water pretty quick. And once, things go dry for the year, what are they going to do, right? So their solution was to dam up Hetch Hetchy Valley in Yosemite, right? Yosemite Valley, before it was a park, right? So he was, engaging in activism to say, hold on, folks, this place is amazing. If we dam this place up, we're going to lose this resource. This is beautiful. Everyone in America should have the opportunity to come out here and be a part of this place. And if we dam this up, we're ruining it. And there's, America is abundant with amazing, beautiful places. But if we dam them all up, or if we chop them all down, or we blow them all up, and if we're mining, we're going to be left with nothing. This place is going to suck, right? So he got really involved in this concept of preserving or conserving land, right? San Francisco ended up winning that battle, but his work out there ultimately led to Yosemite becoming a national park. And so it's in this time period is also when we have my main man, Teddy Roosevelt, stepping up, right? And a lot of folks, on the right side of the aisle can't stand Teddy Roosevelt. Oh, he started progressivism, right? And he started us going down the path of federal overreach amongst the states.
It's funny you said that, because I had a congressman on. He's Republican, and he was not a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt.
Nope.
Surprising. Even though he worked in the parks committee, it seems like his side of it was to take back some of the parks and give it back to corporations. Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and we can go into that.
You said you had a few comments about after you listened to that episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And at this time when Teddy came into his, he did a lot of amazing things. We could talk about him for hours, but when he came into the scene, we were at a point in our history where we kind of had, we have people discussing the need to protect the environment in some capacity. We don't really quite know what that means, but we know that we're causing harm. We know that harm is causing harm on us. And in the future, we're going to have some really big problems. And this led to kind of a couple of different schools of thought between what was being called conservationism, meaning, hey, we can protect the environment. We can, provide conservation measures so that we will be protecting ourselves in the long run for the sake of protecting ourselves. But we can benefit from it. We can manage these things like forestry, or think about modern wildlife conservation. Hey, man, we can go out and hunt, and it's beneficial. And if we do it in a regulated manner where we don't just go kill every single deer out there, we're going to have enough wildlife for the future to eat. And so it's about ethical and intentional management of these resources versus preservationists, which were some folks getting kind of extreme about it, saying, no, we don't need to touch this stuff at all for the sake of nature only. This stuff is sacred. We don't need to get into this. Like, let's just leave this stuff alone completely. There's got to be balance. Conservationism won out ultimately, right? But this was an exciting time because we had multiple folks across the U.S. asking these questions, participating in really the origins of activism in the U.S. Right before Teddy got in, we had a few folks. One was Aldo Leopold. He was a conservationist. He wrote a book called the Sand County Almanac, which was him describing what was a land ethic, saying, hey, we have a duty, we have an ethical responsibility to take care of these lands and these natural resources, right? And he's known as he's known as like the father of wildlife ecology. Our impacts impact the entire food chain up and down, and we're at the top of that food chain. And if we're over here messing with little small critters here and there, it's going to get back to us sooner or later. He was the first one really starting to push these ideas. And then by the time we get to Teddy, we're starting to see massive degradation of the environment across the U.S., both on East Coast, heavy industrialization, and out West with, manifest destiny coming full around with all of the mining, with all the damming, with the building of cities, with, wiped out the Indians, and our wildlife, buffalo gone, and with the railroads coming through, everything completely changed the landscape. And Teddy noticed this, and he kind of had a legacy of being involved in this. So he although he was, he's certainly hated on by the right nowadays a lot, but his time in office was known as the stewardship presidency, right? So his background was, I don't know how much you know about Teddy, but he grew up in like New York City, had asthma from all the smog and stuff. And so that impacted him pretty significantly as a kiddo, and they moved out to the country because of it, right? And smart kiddo. As he was growing up, I think he lost his mother and his wife like back to back. And that's when he moved out to the Dakota Badlands.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was like back to back, like if not the same day, I want to say like 2 days
Really?
later or something.
Holy
like
cow.
back, like
From
literally,
what?
yeah, I don't know, both different things.
Dysentery.
I don't know. Yeah, I'll talk about the dysentery. And then he moved out to the Badlands by himself to just get away from society. And out there, I guess it left him to his thoughts and our relationship with Mother Nature. And he came out of it a better man for it, and had kind of a self marching orders to like do something about it, right? And so he very much, his presidency had a very large response to environmental destruction and waste on the large scale that we were seeing like never before at that time period, right around 1900s, right? And so he decided, hey, the federal government needs to take an active role in managing our natural resources, because if left to unchecked capitalism at this point, 1900, we had more than enough examples to know that we were going to fuck ourselves. I mean, it was so clear at that point in time that the federal government needs to step in, because if the only thing that is driving what we do to our natural resources is profit, we're hosed. He recognized this and he did a lot about it, right? And it's one of my, I got a quote here. One of my favorite quotes from him is, "There are no words that can tell the hidden spirit of the wilderness, that can reveal its mystery, its melancholy, and its charm. The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation, increased and not impaired in value."
Ooh, that's good.
Right?
That's a great way to put it.
Right? It's like, so we have an ethical responsibility to take care of it, right? And another favorite quote of his, that when he went out to the Grand Canyon, and he went out west with my buddy John Muir, and then went out and saw a bunch of cool sights, and they went and did a whole like tour of hiking and camping across the West, right?
Lucky.
Like, oh, I know, right? Like back then too. And so when he got to the Grand Canyon, he looked at it and he goes, "Leave it as it is. You cannot improve upon this." Right? And so we had examples of like, I forget this was probably after that. It could have been before, but like Niagara Falls. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, I went during our little trip.
That's right. Yeah. So I've actually never been there, but Niagara Falls, now it's beautiful, nice, clean site. But back in the day, it was just completely trashed out from a bunch of people, just like posting up shacks and all these different tourist attractions all up on it. And there was just junk everywhere. They had literally like wooden structures hanging off the side of it right there. And it was like sloppy, disgusting. And it was like, oh my gosh, this sucks, right? And so it's examples like that we want to, have national parks and stuff, because if we just let folks come in and set up tourist traps, it's not going to be what it is, right? So it's like, this is perfect. Leave it as it is. Let's just not touch it, right? Leave no trace, so to speak, right? And so his campaign out there, the most celebrated camping trip in U.S. history with John Muir, led to a number of things that it really just kicked in for him. And that was the Reclamation Act and Antiquities Act, which he developed to develop and preserve our national parks, national forests, all sorts of national monuments, reserves, tons of public land, saying, folks, these places are too beautiful. They are a resource in of itself. We do not need to get out here and develop these as either for natural resources or for the sake of capitalism, tourist traps, whatever. Let's just preserve these places. We can visit them, but leave no trace. And that's the origins of our national parks. It's like, who doesn't see the value in that? A lot of people get mad at him about that. Like, oh no, the government should own that land. We should. Well, you know what happens when people own that, right? They junk it up.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on how you look at the government. I mean, we are as self-governed people, so if you truly believe that, then by the government owning it, it's us owning it. We have access to it.
That's
now,
the point.
If it was like the olden days where the nobility owned their giant acreage and no one was allowed out there, that's one thing. But I personally have benefited from all these lands, and when I talk to people from other countries, I guess I didn't realize the scope of how amazing our park system is. Apparently that doesn't really exist in most of the world. It's, you know, either it's all publicly owned or you just don't have access to it, period. Where here we have this BLM land where you can just go out and really live.
Yep.
And lots of it's pretty, you know, dry and arid and good luck living out there, but it's gorgeous.
Yep. This land is our land, right? And a lot of people get really pissed off about the federal government owning all that land, and we should be profiting off of that. That should be privatized and all that. I don't get that, right? By the way, Costa Rica is a great example of other countries preserving their land. They have all those national parks and preserved land. And that idea is growing quite rapidly. It's pretty sweet, but it's very uniquely America. That's where it started. I mean, and you know, you grew up with all that BLM land. Dude, we don't have that here in Texas, as you are finding out.
All private,
we have
except for small little portions.
We have some cool
Big
state
Bend
parks.
is like the only.
Big Bend's awesome, but I mean, we have a few cool state parks around. But other than that, it's all private land. They say that the only private land in Texas is that thin strip of asphalt between the barbed wire fences, which are our roads, right? And it's kind of garbage. I love when I go up to Colorado, all the just public land. You can just pull over anywhere and just hang out and explore. Out here, it's all barbed wire fences, and you get shot if you step off the road. That makes sense. That's one thing I do not like about Texas.
That's hyperbole.
I don't know, man. Like if you go down, think about it like this. I've been wanting to go on a guy's trip forever now, down the Devil's River on a kayaking trip. And you could go down there and you could pull off anywhere you wanted. It's just like no development out there. I mean, you will go 2 days without seeing anything but I think one bridge or something. And I'm hearing more and more stories that if you pull off on the wrong one, there's a bunch of purple spray paint on stuff. And if you pull off on the wrong one, people come down there with guns and run you off.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like ranchers or what?
Yeah, it's ranchers. And I'm sure I get it.
Why would they care if you're camping on their edge?
I'm sure all it takes is, I'm sure all it takes is just a few bad experiences with assholes coming through and like dumping beer cans or getting wild.
Probably shot a cow or
that's
something.
That's all it
like
takes,
that.
you know? Like, I mean, I feel for you. I mean, the folks down here on the Guadalupe River, you know, they have these beautiful houses that they saved up for and put a lot of money into, and that's their vacation home. And they want to have family time over on the beautiful river, and tubers come by and like drunk assholes and get out and take a shit on their lawn. I get it, man. I wouldn't want that. Right. But balance to all things. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so progressivism started under Teddy Roosevelt, and you know that the big boy that carried a big stick, he got a lot done. And what's interesting was it was the national parks, the public land, the environment that really started him down that road of expanding federal jurisdiction in the federal system under the executive branch, right? And so I don't think he coined it, but he started us down that road of progressivism, which was at the time. And I should state, I'm not a progressive. I don't know like current folks who call themselves progressives. I don't even know how they would define themselves, but progressivism as its origins, right, in the early 1900s was simply, you know, hey, let's just constantly evaluate ourselves to see how we can get better at things. Get better at ourselves, our lives, our country, right? And it's just the idea of adaptive management, right? Hey, every now and then, let's just take a step back, look at what we're doing, seeing where we can have room for improvement, and maybe try and make some improvement, right? And so back then they were, you know, evaluating the idea of let's use science, engineering, and technology to not just promote modernization and getting better ourselves, but identify solutions to political corruption, for example, or, you know, solutions to inefficiencies within our system at large that may benefit only a small portion of our population at the harm of others type deal, right?
I like to think of it as like turning your video game to hard mode. You can go through like a campaign on easy mode, and it's just focus on you take care of everything. But when you turn it to hard mode, you're like, yeah, I can handle life, but I can also take care of other people. And I think that's what in this, like you said, modern progressivism may be something else, but at the base of how it started, it was, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt, I came from an affluent family. I'm set, but I'm going to go out of my way to make sure I'm thinking of other people who can't take care of their own shit. And for the general public, how can we as a society use our synergy to make it better for everyone and not just the cream that's already got it good?
Bingo, right? Because at that point in time, we had the American Revolution, and then we had the Industrial Revolution, and things were just expanding, not unchecked, but largely unchecked. And it was just, for the most part, a lot of folks like really excited about what America was becoming and the American dream. And our economic growth and acceleration was like, yeah. But no one was really taking the time to step back and say, what's the price here?
What's the long-term cost?
Always a price. Yes. And so he really was asking the right questions and determined to get back to the origins of really what was in the Constitution, right? In the Constitution, and I know a lot of folks, again, on the right side of the aisle, when they hear the word welfare, they, freak out. But, the Constitution, excuse me, very much, it states very clearly that Congress is in charge of providing for the common defense and the welfare of the American people, right? That's in the Constitution. I mean, it's there clear as day. The welfare, the Congress is responsible for
welfare, not in handouts, but in the general well-being of
our country.
The country.
Yes. And a lot of folks think that that's none of the government's business, right? And no, it very much is. I mean, the federal government was put in place very much for defense and to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, that we don't just become a corrupt, just shit pile of a country in a society, right? I mean, that was the idea from the beginning. They wrote it in there, and people like to ignore that, right? So under Teddy Roosevelt, he started down the path of the federal government addressing the unchecked capitalism, the unchecked growth that we saw from the industrialization. And at that time, immigration was huge at that time. We had this huge, massive influx of immigration that these immigrants were being taken advantage of across the board, as basically slave labor, right? To many of them, it was a better opportunity from where they came from. Yes. But when we look at the amount of profit that some of those industries, those companies saw off the backs of those immigrants, it's very clear to see that, okay, yeah, sure. Even though these folks have it better than where they were, if they're making pennies and you're making thousands, that's not very cool. What we saw during that time period was the first major massive gap in income and in social status in America. I mean, it was drastic with that large influx of immigration and industrialization in that time period, right? And so Teddy set out to do something about it. And it's like what he coined was the square deal, right? I don't know if you remember that from like high school political sciences. Yeah, it was a square deal. And basically it was the federal government should take a more active role in the conservation of natural resources, in corporate regulation, and consumer protection. What's not to like about that? Who can be against that, right? Hey, we have a finite amount of resources. Government should probably make sure that we don't just blow through them all and our country's left with nothing and we're dependent on other countries, right? Corporate regulation. Hey, maybe it's a good idea to put some rules in place to make sure corporations can't control the people into fiefdoms, right? And then lastly, consumer protection, right? It's the idea that, hey, we should probably have some basic laws against selling, snake oil and putting labels on shit that it's not, and it's complete lies. I mean, literally before this progressive movement of Teddy, you could sell anything under any name and no one could do anything about it. I mean, maybe if you sold somebody poison and they died, a sheriff might come get you, but you could sell anyone anything. You could sell people rotten meat. You could do whatever the hell you wanted, right? I don't think it's that crazy of an idea for the federal government and at the state level and local level to start having regulations put in place that states, hey, we need to just be taking care of ourselves, folk. Let's not just and this literally was coming off the back of the Wild Wild West time, right? I mean, that's where we were. So
when you're thinking progressivism now, it's going from a pretty civilized, nice place, pushing it even farther, which creates some discontent. But if you put it in the scope of what was happening then, people were getting shot in the streets all the time, not like they are here in Texas, which happens, relatively less. People are literally getting poisoned. People are literally getting dysentery, Oregon Trail style. And so progressivism there, I think anyone can get behind the ideas that he was pushing at that time.
Yep. It's the origins of the expansion of the federal government as we know it, certainly under the executive branch. Right. That's where it really started. Before that, it was pretty limited. The executive branch was pretty darn limited.
Knee jerk when I hear that, because of my current lifetime, I personally think the federal government's a little bloated.
It's bloated.
And by little, I mean like extremely. Right. And so I can see how right now from the scope that we have, we don't want to have, the talking point is big government. Yeah. And I think you said it earlier, the only answer is really balance. It's being able to educate ourselves and the people around us on, all right, there's no avoiding having at least some weight in the government because of the things that we're talking about right now. Yeah. And we have to just use that scalpel, surgeon's scalpel, to actually weed through it, because the big blunt moves of all or nothing definitely are not the right way to go.
No. There's so many instances of unnecessarily bloated government that need to go away. There's so many regulations that are out there that need to go away that are in place by lobbyists, right?
But you can't cut whole organizations or gut committees like we've been seeing recently. But we truly do need to expose at the very least.
Absolutely. That's why we need those things like the ethics committees, and right, like they should be doing their job at identifying those and calling them out. But the problem is, and we can get more into that later, but lobbyists, right? Like a good example of I don't know if it's considered a regulation or just rules in place is, we're about to hit tax season and we have to freaking pay all these people to do our taxes for us, even though the government knows what we owe them. But that's their requirement. And why is that their requirement? Because freaking H&R Block is paying them, those congressmen and women, to make those rules stay in place, right? That's the only reason it's there.
I read something recently how TurboTax is like on the very thin line of, I'm not going to really speculate here. I need to reread that article, but like you said, it sounds like some of these tax preparation companies, the big ones, are in bed with how we make our laws and who makes the laws. It's
100%. That's what's going on. They pay the certain men and women in Congress who are on whatever those committees are to keep those in place. I mean, this is a great example when people say the government should be doing stuff. It should all be privatized. Well, no, we're already paying the IRS to track what our tax situation is. Why don't we just let them tell us what we owe them? We're already paying for that in our tax dollars. Why are we also having a middleman in there? It makes no sense.
Oh, we're about to pay him $80 billion. So maybe they should start actually doing their job.
I would love that. I would love every February for the IRS to send me a letter saying, here's how much you owe in taxes. And if you want to, adjust this, let us know. You send us what you think.
Pretty much you have to send in your expenses. If you own a business, send us your expenses and then you're done.
Exactly. Right. That makes sense. But to have those middlemen in there. And I mean, I love my tax person. They do a great job and it's necessary, but it's there for a reason. And it's because of lobbyists creating rules that are bullshit. So there's lots of that.
And unnecessary rules. Apparently the tax law would fill an entire house. Just if you printed it in a book, it's
I believe it.
Roomfuls of information.
I believe it. Yep. So when I'm speaking about the origins of and in defense of regulations, this is very much in the context of the ones that make sense, right? Not these like bullshit ones that absolutely need to go away. Those that they do, right? Teddy Roosevelt, when he expanded the federal government's role, it's all through those executive agencies. Right before him, we didn't have all those Department of Energy, Department of Labor. That was never a thing, right? All those huge expanded executive agencies started with him.
So Teddy Roosevelt created the deep state.
Yeah, he's the OG deep state. Yes.
Let's just say it how it is.
Yeah, that started from a very real need with the Interstate Commerce Commission, right? And the idea was that back then you could the monopolies, very wealthy, very powerful people could literally bring down a state, or damn near have a state at their beck and call due to their monopoly and hold on interstate commerce, the railroads being the big one, right? If you're a small state and you only had one rail line going through your state at the time, and it had stops, and that's how you're getting a ton of your resources, food, energy, whatever. And the state next door, if the railroad company gets in bed with that governor and states, hey, I'm going to pay you money here, and we're going to squeeze some money out of the next state over. They could do that. Imagine being, told like, hey, rail line ain't coming through your state anymore unless you do X, Y, or Z. They could literally hold states hostage through that. And this expands into, pipelines, telephone lines, whatever that might be, any interstate commerce. That's really the origins of when we talk about federal government having regulatory jurisdiction on all the states. Because if it's just a state matter, if it's contained to your state, hey, it's probably best to keep it at the state level. But the second that it impacts your or another state is when the federal government should step in. It's just kind of like our own personal rights, right? Your rights end where mine are infringed, right? Well, the second one state's business starts messing with another's, the federal government should probably be at least in the discussion at some point, right? So interstate commerce is really the origins of these large federal regulatory environments, because it came from a very real place. Railroads being one of the biggies, right? Shipping as well. And so Teddy was out there doing stuff about it, right? And he was known for trust busting, breaking up these monopolies. He was seen back, and this is the era of, Rockefellers and all of them. And he saw how at the time, if we left that unchecked, America was turning into fiefdoms, basically. If you think of all those mining towns, all of those plant towns, industry towns, where you have one company, they'd set up a town, you worked for them, or you didn't have a life there, you had to move on, and you were basically an indentured servant. And this was happening all over the place. And they were getting paid nothing. The people at the top had a monopoly. They were profiting just bukus off it. And, labor capital is a very real thing. Just because they're taking risk and putting in the initial capital, that doesn't mean shit. They're not going to make money without these people. The people need a fair share. And it's probably best that we give the people some rights, right? You remember Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, right? I mean, horrible working conditions in these like meat packing plants for immigrants, right? People getting sick, people injured, dying out there, and the quality of the meat, the unhealthy, disgusting, unsafe conditions that our meat was going through, and people were buying this shit and getting sick from it. It's hey, I think we should probably have some rules about it. And you know what? It's probably going to be applicable at all states, right? And so that's when he really started, A, trust busting up these monopolies, and B, giving workers' rights at the federal level. And that does require some federal agencies to step up, develop laws, develop some kind of oversight, and provide interpretation when this stuff eventually started shaking out and going to through the court systems and whatnot, right? So it's child labor laws, consumer protection laws, regulated food supply, Food and Drug Administration. They don't always get it right. They've been corrupted before, but imagine what life was like before that. You could sell anyone anything from rotten meat to chemicals inside shit. I mean, it's bad, dude. And there's no reason to not have that in place, and have that at the federal level. To me, absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, when you have any change at all, there's going to be a winner and loser, always, 100% of the time. Someone's going to have to pay more. Someone's going to benefit from any change. And in this case, you have a huge majority of the population who's benefiting from these changes. And the people who are paying the cost of the change are these uber rich monopoly owners, whether they're the Carnegies or the Steels. Wait, is Carnegie Steel? Or was it? Carnegie was Steel, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever I talk about implementing different policies or change or, bloating the government even more, that's how I like to think about it. Like if we did this change, who's paying that price and who's going to benefit from it? And sometimes it kind of exposes on the political side of things, the motivations. It's like, all right, if we leave these policies that protect our waterways, who's winning and who's losing? And all of a sudden it very clearly shows which politicians are in the pockets of which corporations.
It's so simple. Like earlier when you asked, like, oh, how do we find that balance between the experts telling us what's good for us at the, toxicological level and how much exposure we should have to certain concentrations of contamination versus the companies who are doing it and providing us some kind of service. It really is simple. It's their job is certainly, their job back in 1900 was that one owner and his family to maximize profit. Now their job is to maximize, shareholders' profits. It typically is pretty simple. Just a matter of what is our appetite for, putting up with that. Right. I think that's what it all comes down to. Because we've seen certainly nowadays, think about how, I don't know how much exposure or how much you've seen, but in the early, I guess, post World War II, we got pretty dirty, man. This country was pretty freaking sloppy. Industrialization was everywhere. Any major port was just completely filthy. We had just oil and chemicals floating on most bodies of water. In our estuaries, in our rivers where people drink the water, people fish and consume that fish. And not too many people were doing too much about it. Teddy didn't quite have the, I guess, background or forethought to, like, no kidding, limit what we can put into the environment, whether it's into the air, smokestacks at factories, or into the water, our toxic waste into the water. But gosh, it took another 60 freaking years for America to say, hold up, man. All of a sudden, our country is a freaking dump, man. We should probably start doing something about this, right? There's so many instances of where environmental regulations have cleaned up our country. We're freaking pristine clean now compared to like the 60s, right?
Didn't you say like one of the main things that pushed the EPA was some sort of river catching on fire?
Yeah. Up to like I'm going to just pronounce like Chahuga River or something like that. It wasn't like one spill, one accident. It was like up by Chicago, like literally the entire body of water just had so much oil and chemicals on the top inch or so of the water. It ignited on fire and the whole damn thing was on fire. This wasn't from one source. It was just a way of doing things. Every industry in the area would just dump their waste into whatever their closest body of water was. And that all trickles down into the main bodies of water, right? That was one of the first like major environmental disasters. We've had quite a few environmental disasters. You think about the tanker, the Valdez oil tanker out there that spilled everywhere, the Love Canal, where instead of just releasing all of their toxic waste into the river, they were, I guess, cool enough to put them in a bunch of shoddy barrels underground and covered it up with some soil, and then they went and built some schools and subdivisions on top of it, and kids start just dropping like flies like in no time.
Oh wow,
the Love Canal.
Hear about that one.
Oh yeah, I was up in New York, and basically that environmental disaster is what's led to the Superfund act within the EPA that basically provides a mechanism in place to go after companies once they close up shop and move on, that, hey, you destroyed people's lives over here by contaminating the environment. You're responsible. That's what started the whole, having a mechanism in place to hold people accountable and responsible for cleaning their shit up. Or if that company is gone, they're bankrupt, they're no longer, it created a Superfund, where a mechanism to where the EPA and the government can go and clean that stuff up with taxpayer dollars. But that's really what, modern environmental regulations comes down to. accountability, right? This contamination is in the environment. We're breathing it. We're consuming it in our food. We're drinking it. And the whole idea is let's make folks accountable for their decisions, right? Why would we be comfortable with a company polluting the groundwater or a river, getting everyone sick, and them just saying, "No, my bad, we're going to go bankrupt and just bounce on out of town," right? No, hold them accountable. And I don't see any reason we shouldn't be holding folks accountable. We've come a long ways. We've cleaned up so much. If you think about the CFCs, the cans of CFCs, aerosol, in our freaking ozone layer, we put a big hole in it. And guess what? Environmental regulations got that whole, that entire freaking hole patched, right?
I just read something recently that it's back to like 99%, something around there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's lead in our gasoline. We had lead in our gasoline for years.
We had lead in everything. Lead's an amazing product until it kills you.
Same with asbestos, right? That's what, we have entire generations that are pretty kind of, I'll be polite, but I don't know, as polite as I can be, kind of fucked up in the head with brain damage from lead.
Sorry, boomers.
Boomers, dude. I'm telling you, it's literally, dude, the lead exposure that boomers had growing up in their entire lifetime, it has impacted their brain. I mean, this isn't like some wild, hypothesis. It very much has impacted how their brains work.
Buckle up, buddy, because soon they're going to be talking about the millennials, which is us, about how our brains have been destroyed too. Our kids are just going to be super geniuses compared to us with all the shit that we're not throwing into their bodies anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least trying to. We're still not there because, I mean, I got rid of all of our Teflon stuff because I started looking into it. And apparently it's pretty safe as long as you don't have chips. And I looked at all of our Teflon and there's scraps and chips everywhere. I'm like, how much forever chemical have I put into not only my body, but my baby's bodies without even realizing it because of just the lack of education on my part and the lack of being forced to these companies to actually take responsibility for the products that are actually being put out there.
Yeah. No, those perfluorinated compounds, very long carbon chains, they're in your blood and they're not going to go away anytime soon. They're there. But they're in everything, fast food wrappers.
Unless we actively find some technology, which I think they're actually working on.
They're working on it. UV right now. Incineration isn't the best option, but yeah, they're working on it. But in defense of that, we didn't know that stuff would be that bad for us for a long time. We've been using that for a while, and
we still really don't know the extent. We do have enough evidence now that there are some indications that it does increase cancer, but we don't really truly know what it's doing to us. The actual, the mechanics inside our body.
Yeah. One of the projects I'm working on right now is reviewing all of the EPA's toxicological evaluations for different PFAS constituents. They've done them for the first few longer chain ones, and now we're kind of in the mid-range chains. And so those are all out for public review. So we're providing toxicological evaluations on those, or on basically, providing risk assessments. Hey, did the EPA get it right? Where can these different toxicokinetics impact us on our liver, on our brain? And should we provide any recommendations to the EPA on, hey, are y'all way over the line here? Y'all are way off, or, oh gosh, y'all are spot on. This stuff's pretty bad for us, right? It's still emerging. We still have a lot to learn about it. We don't quite know the impacts of it.
Almost makes me want to invest in a reverse osmosis setup, because that's truly the only way that your water's going to be free of all of these materials, right?
Not all of them.
Really, even reverse osmosis won't get them out?
RO won't get out Gen X. PFAS. Gen X is one of the PFAS perfluorinated constituents, and RO won't work for those. ROs, it's you have carbon filters, you have reverse osmosis, and you have ion exchange. And you damn near need to have all three of those if you want everything out. But then your water's going to taste like shit. I like my hard water. I have amazing tasting hard water from a limestone. I love the flavor of it. So I don't even have a water softener.
So I'm currently just drinking straight out of the tap. I'm in San Antonio Water System SAW.
It's great.
I've heard it's one of the better ones. In fact, you recommended that. You actually know some of the folks that are working over there. Should people, at least in San Antonio, feel comfortable drinking just straight out of the tap, or do you think
Absolutely.
they need to do some sort of?
Absolutely. Not to say every now and then something might make it through, but
mostly the
fine.
pipes, right?
You're fine.
If anything.
Yeah.
Well, San Antonio is a fairly new city.
Yeah. Pipes are good.
Yeah.
No, it's most major municipalities. They have they're federally regulated, and they monitor that water, taking samples.
So how does that, so Flint, Michigan's the big one, right? How does that happen?
How did they let that get so bad?
Yeah. Like how am I supposed to feel comfortable drinking straight from the tap when we have a fairly decent sized city that did so poorly?
Yeah, that's an example of people just being lazy and not caring. You're required to have an annual water report on any water purveyor has to have a report. And they for years have known, hey, lead's getting bad over here, folks, but no one really cared.
They knew it, and they just didn't tell the public.
The consumers knew it. No, the consumers knew
Everyone
it. It's in
knew
the consumer
it,
report. Yeah, but it's just, I mean, who takes the time to go look at their annual water purveyor consumer report, right? Not that many folks.
And their mayor just
right? And they're not going to publicize it, right? And the folks that work there, it's probably I don't know the specifics on it, but my understanding is that it's a mixture of incompetency, folks not knowing what to do. Probably budget, what the hell are we going to do about it? Even if we knew, I mean, what are we going to do about it?
Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Their brains are all melted from all the lead.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, you can't really blame them.
Yes, exactly.
Self-perpetuating.
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah. And to be honest with you, a lot of those situations just come down to budget. America is not really big for some reason on spending money on our infrastructure. It blows my mind. Like, why would we not?
Well, we are now.
We're on a solid path right now for getting back on track, but we're still not doing it. I mean, it's that big infrastructure bill is going to take a while to flesh out. They're not. I mean, they haven't even released all the funds yet. They're having to
It'll be over decades, isn't it? The plan.
The funds will all be released probably by, I think, 2026. All the funds should be at least at a minimum dedicated to projects, right? But yeah, some of that work is going to take a long time. You got to do the design before the build, right? And before you do the design, you got to do the evaluation. You got to do, if it's water, you got to, evaluate what's your water quality, what are your specs. And you have to get a lot of data before you can even go into design. And then design takes a while. Then you got to get it approved, and then you got to get on the building, right? But our style of capitalism is such that we value, or at a minimum, we're comfortable with those large corporations that are chasing that, kind of milking it and getting as much out of it as they can, as opposed to we as a country saying, hey, we got an issue here. Let's just fucking jump on this. No bullshit.
Yeah,
Let's just get at it.
That's just impossible, because at the end of the day, there is a human being that's trying to run a business and trying to maximize his profits. And it sucks, but we haven't found a better ways as a human race to do it. I don't know,
man. I mean, Europeans, many Asian countries, they know how to just get on it. They know how, it's just a cultural thing, man. Like, hey, this whole interchange is fucked up. Everyone is pissed off about it. Let's do something about it. And then just get at it. Yeah,
but they still have contractors that are bidding on the work, and those contractors are going to try to maximize. They
don't have the ones that are doing a good job at it don't have these, greasing the palms of all the right folks and dragging shit out and getting kickbacks. And
I'd be shocked if there wasn't that.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
I'd
but
be shocked.
At least they have it figured out to where it's efficient.
I think it's more likely that they have a denser population per land mass, and so it's just way easier to take care of it. If you go into a dense population like a city in the U.S., we have really damn good infrastructure compared to a lot of places. And this is from my experience recently traveling around a lot of Europe. Yeah, they have these countryside areas that are pretty beat up, but anywhere that you have any population at all, it's great. But you see the same here in the US for the most part. Yeah, there's bad parts of town. You can go out to the country and there's just terrible country roads, but that's because there's no money there. There's not a lot of tax revenue coming in, and they're going to focus all of the funds going to the more dense places. I really think we're too hard on ourselves as an American nation. Like, if you look at us as a whole and you realize that we've got this huge chunk of space with only 300 million, but per, capita, we have a ton of space compared to most other places, Europe, all of China, all of India, pretty much any place that we're, our peers are at, other than Canada maybe, but they're just America Junior.
Yeah.
So
we truly have the land of abundance.
I think we're just hard on ourselves when we're talking about how we're terrible at infrastructure. We're terrible at that. I think we did have a little bit of a slowdown, focusing on some other things. We had a great infrastructure. We didn't realize the maintenance was as big as it needed to be. Plus, technology's just gone so fast that, I mean, even electricity, for example, America, we were at the forefront. So we got the 110 volt, and then Europe jumps online afterwards. They're like, oh, there's actually a little bit better way. We're going to do it this way. So yeah, they've got a leg up on us, but that's because they were standing on the shoulders. And that's the downside of being the innovator and pushing forward. The benefits of capitalism, the way that America works, is we do have that amazing cutting edge, but we're paying the cost for it on some other fronts.
I'd argue that we were the innovators.
I think we still are in like software and anything that really matters right now. We are truly the cutting edge on most things.
Some things, not all things. I would argue some things.
Well, it's like the Olympics. Other countries are going to win some gold medals here and there, but at the end of the day, we're going to take them all home. Yeah. The majority. And it may not continue to be that way unless we're staying vigilant. But I think we are making some good moves right now that if you're conservative, you're not super happy with. But I think, to your point, I think is necessary, that what we need to be focusing on not gutting the budget, but trying to expose as much as possible and be as transparent as possible. So this trillions of dollars that we're putting towards our infrastructure actually goes to our infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my concern is that we've been on such a decline, and I don't see an immediate critical path forward on improvement due to our current party politics and culture wars. Our freaking our politicians and our people are so consumed with these stupid culture wars that we're not focusing on what really matters at all. Like if you look at even in this past Congress session, but this current session, the conversations that are happening up there, oh my God, they have nothing to do with our problems right now. They're not up there trying to solve any problems at all. They're up there just bickering about the stupidest things.
Well, the perfect example of that is the McCarthy voting, right? So you had a few holdouts and apparently their conditions were, we'll vote for you, but we have to gut the ethics committee. Yeah. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like that's your concession. That's the one thing that you want to get done, that and make a farcical, like we're going to defund the IRS, even though we know it's not going to pass through the Senate.
Yep.
I don't know a lot about politics, but when I hear little snippets here and there, some of them maybe I'm just ignorant and I don't understand the inner workings, but those seem pretty blatant to me.
It's very blatant. And again, I don't see, it was kind of refreshing in the past 2 years. My opinion is that Biden is not a great president. He's just old. He has no new ideas. We can do so much better than that. But it was refreshing under the past 2 years Congress. They were at least putting forth some solutions to a lot of our problems. The infrastructure bill, even though, the Inflation Act wasn't going to do much about inflation, but it was packed full of items that were solutions to our problems, both on our infrastructure and beyond and whatnot. My fear is that with the new Congress, that they're just back to petty little, just complete dumb shit.
Well, we're going to be at a standstill again. That's what checks and balances are for. People who see the necessity of change and agree with it or on board with it, they get frustrated that we aren't able to make these quick changes. But even to your point of earlier, how humanity, we kind of rush ahead without thinking of the consequences. We need to see that, in my opinion, as a benefit, slowing down the works in some cases, because as these new technologies emerge, we're going to have more and more opportunity to make some pretty drastic changes to our society as far as how we feed ourselves, how we house ourselves, everything, every aspect of our life is going to be changing with these emerging technologies. And unless we kind of pause and let ourselves educate each other about how the technologies are going to affect us long term, then we could be potentially setting ourselves up for a bigger failure than not having these, the EPA in place. So I personally right now am kind of on the progressive side. I think we do need to make some drastic changes, but I'm not going to look at, the conservatives right now and just completely discount their concerns. I may not agree with all of them, but at least it's given us some breathing room to say, all right, well, where are we going to put all this money? How are we going to do it? My concern right now is that our current conservative branch is more of posturing, and it's truly just people. They're kind of clowns up there. A lot of them.
That's all they are, is clowns.
They aren't even politicians. No. They're actors that are being told what to say. And it's scary. It's unfortunate. And I think what we need to be doing right now is not decreasing how much we're spending, but increasing how much we expose the transparency of where these funds are going and how we're spending them, and just simply educate the population on it so we can start voting a little bit better next time.
Yeah, no, I think it you make a good point when we discuss, checks and balances and bringing balance to the idea of, progress, moving forward. If it's just for the sake of moving forward, hey, there's got to be a balance to that, because that can quickly turn into just, excited, enthusiastic people wanting to try a bunch of new things and could take us down the wrong path. Right. So there's a balanced conservative need for us to like, hey, hold on, let's just talk about that first. Right. Slow your roll. Right. It's kind of like the idea of, Fords and Chevys every year putting out a new model of a bunch of barely checked bells and whistles that haven't been, ran through, tried and true, versus Toyota that, hey, let's think this through. Let's test the hell out of it, and let's get everyone on board. And we're only going to release a new model every, 6 years or whatever, every 8 years, but it's going to fucking work when we get there. Right. So there's definitely that balance needed. However, with the current culture war party politics that are in place right now, I don't know of any valid concerns from the right that they have that I'm at all considering, worthy of discussion. I don't know too many at all. It's to the point now where they're just the party of obstruction. And think like this. When was the last time you saw a Republican congressman or woman bring forth a solution to an actual problem?
Well, their point's just to gum up the works to slow it down and then let the progressives push forward to progress, right?
That's all. That's all. Since Newt Gingrich, that's all the Republicans have really done, was to sabotage government and turn around and say, "Look, folks, federal government sucks. We need to defund it." And we should probably spend our money over here at my buddy's corporation, right? Like that's like their entire MO. And if they had legitimate concerns, yes, let's have that discussion, but it's not happening. They're not bringing forth solutions to actual problems. Their entire MO is to completely fabricate and make up scenarios and then live in daily fear and anger.
Create fear.
Yeah, that's all it is. I mean, they're so concerned about woke, which I don't even know what woke is, but I think I sent this to you yesterday. That's one of them is now creating an anti-woke caucus in Congress. What the fuck is it? What the fuck even is that, Jace? I don't even know what the fuck that is.
Don't wake up, guys.
I don't even know what woke is. And I think if there's anything more cringe than a West Coast Ivy League student on YouTube talking about being woke, it's all these conservatives that are terrified of woke when it's not even like I've not once in my day have I gone outside my house and come into contact with woke. Like, what the fuck even is that? Like, the only examples I can tell is they get pissed off that Disney has, folks that aren't straight in their movies. And they're terrified of, like that's the only example that I know that I personally have been in contact with. I don't know. I mean,
well, I think it's simple. It's if you're on the conservative side, things are good. You don't want it to change, whether it's social, religious, whatever. We like it how it is. Mm-hmm. If you're in power, If you're a CEO of a top company, the best thing you can do is nothing.
Yep.
You keep it as is. You're going to stay in power. And that's what Russia's been doing, right? They've just stagnated their whole country because they don't want to lose power at the top. So you've got this conservative side that they're like, hey, we like America how it is. We don't need to make any changes. We got our small communities. It works for us. Stop changing things. We don't want woke. That's different. That's new. That's not us. The other side is, well, we see that there's not something perfect right now. Let's work towards that.
Adapt.
We have issues here, whether it's on the social side of, you know, my daughter committed suicide because she thought she was a boy and we didn't handle it right. That's a real issue for a real family. And regardless of whether you agree with that on a religious or moral side versus the pure pain and suffering that you have as a family, it is an issue that people need to address and talk about and understand and educate each other. I think one side, they just don't want to accept that there needs to be some changes or there is a different way of life.
On the right, if you're right, it's those in power scratching and clawing to stay in power. But for those that are not in power that buy into that shit, I think a lot of it just comes down to they're terrified one day of walking into a restaurant and being spoken to how they've spoken to people with different color skin most of their life. It's
part of
different socioeconomic statuses.
Well, it's not only the people who are in power, the people at the top who are pushing on the money around. Those are the people in power that are wanting to not change the laws around water, et cetera. Oh, yeah. But then the constituents that are voting for them, it's partially they're being lied to and they're understanding it. But the other part, and I think this is part that I understand very well because this is the culture and the life that I grew up in. It's you have a core belief, and it's right now in America, it's, you know, Christianity for the most part. And you have a core belief of what you believe God wants of you. And a lot of these people are good people. They're people who are honest, trying to do what they think is the best for them, their family, their God, their country, for everyone. And it's simply that they have their core beliefs lead them down to a different conclusion, a different solution. And so these people who are voting for the right, because they see, hey, this is the party of maintaining, this is the party of keeping the values that we've had for so many years, damned to be that these values completely step on other cultures and or ways of life that, and themselves. But it's the comfort, it's the peace of knowing that my children are going to be able to have the same life that I had. And I think you and I agree that what they're missing out on by thinking that is the life that their kids could have if they were able to take a step back and see the consequences of what the conservative side currently, I'm not saying this in general for conservative nature because there is a place for it, as I've pointed out earlier, but I think in our current state, we really need to expose the clowns that are in there. And you have them on the left too.
Oh, absolutely.
You have the people that truly, they are great actors and performers.
Corporate
all they do is say, all right, what's going to get me reelected and what is going to benefit me and my entourage the most, and damned be to whatever's best for the nation.
Yeah. No, I think one of the problems that we're going to have to solve if we're ever going to get, because I mean, let's face it, the folks on the right who are buying into all these lies, all this bullshit. I mean, there's so many of them. They're really good folks and they're trying to stick to what their perceived core values are. But unfortunately, a lot of those core values are based on lies, right? And so the folks at the top of the power have, you know, lied to them and made them afraid that if others get a piece of the pie, their piece of the pie is going to get a little smaller, right? And they don't have the concept of, you know, all ships, you know, floating with higher waters together is over their head, right? So they're believing all these complete falsehoods because those falsehoods are very good at implementing fear of, you know, what's going to happen if all these other poor people all of a sudden start rising up, quote unquote, which you and I would consider just getting their fair share. They're working just as hard, if not harder, right? They deserve equal freaking share and rights, right? But you know, their fear is that, oh gosh, if they rise up, all of a sudden I'm going to be where they're at right now. I don't want to be there, or I don't even want to be equal to them. I want to be above them. right? And to me, that from an ethical point of view, I don't understand how they can't recognize that, even beyond, believing those lies, right? They're so wound up in it that they spend all day long just pissed off thinking that, oh shit, somewhere out there, someone's getting something they don't deserve. And I don't know how to empathize with that mentality. But a larger question is, how do we fix the unchecked lies that are going down to them that they're believing, right? From those in control that are pushing it through politicians and through media, that, politicians and the media are just spouting what they were told to by their sponsors, right? That's all they are. They're just microphones for, these corporations, these monopolies, and those in power trying to hold on, right? And
Tucker Carlson's lawyers flat out said it.
oh yeah,
He's not telling the news. He's an entertainer.
It's toxic entertainment that
they can't take him seriously by saying some of these
our
things.
society is addicted to it. But even if you were to take away the media, that if you were somehow able to hold like Fox News and them accountable for the lies that they spew, it's tough to still get around the amount of misinformation that's out there by those in power, because they've developed some very, very sophisticated ways to legitimize these lies. If you think about the think tanks that we have in this country that are in some people's minds like, that's a professional organization full of experts that are, evaluating and providing solutions to all of our problems up there. When no, all this is just a group of like propaganda people for those in power, and they're very sophisticated, pushing out websites, reports, quote unquote, studies, quote unquote, that nothing more than just bullshit.
Great example of that is pharmaceutical companies getting doctors and creating their own organizations that are agreeing with them. The OxyContin craze that happened and subsequently, created a huge addiction problem in the United States. Part of it was because they created organizations that they claimed weren't associated with them, that did their own independent studies and proved that these things are not addictive and were, there's breakthrough pain. So the answer is to increase the dosage. And you can take that onto any industry. We've seen that with Chevron recently. More information has come out how they've known since the 70s through their own study that they knew the issue and the impact that was going to have on the climate by burning all these fossil fuels. And instead they chose to not only just hide it, but also push a completely false narrative. And so
it very much, it's sophisticated. They call it the tobacco strategy, right? The tobacco industry was one of the first major industries that got away with these huge lie campaigns, right? So every company, every corporate entity that's pushing these things ever since, they've always termed it the tobacco strategy, to develop these think tanks that are seemingly legitimate. The Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, right? All of those think tanks, and they push them out, and people are like, oh, and then they hand that over to their buddies on Fox News who reads the report. And so this is straight from the Heritage Foundation. They do a lot of good work over there, and folks, we need to trust this shit. So it's like, to me, it's very simple that like, oh gosh, if it comes from one of those, you don't trust it. But there's so many people in our society that just looks at those and is like, oh yeah, clearly this must be the case, right? Like I don't know the solution to that. We're in the era of information, and it's falsehoods and misinformation that's now crippling us. Not information should be helping us.
How I see it, the only solution is people who have the potential for power. They just need to make a choice of giving away that power. It's the whole, Philmont, he was a billionaire that created a an amazing refuge of land in New Mexico. And he decided the only things you truly keep in life are the ones you give away. We need to popularize that. We need to help people understand that the only way that we can get America and truly the world into the best possible place is to educate people about synergy. We need to realize that's the only thing that truly separates humans from the rest of the kingdom, is us being able to work together, combine our efforts to create something better. And instead of pooling all of that excess, let's call it profits, but the excess benefits from the synergy into a small percentage of the population, we need to make it cool to give away. Say like, hey, you've made it to a point to where you are comfortable and healthy and you have all your basic needs met. Your direct family has all of its basic needs met, and your direct community has all of its basic needs met. All right, let's turn it to master mode, guys. That's, you personally have to choose to go above and beyond and say, all right, I got all this shit taken care of. All right, how can I help the next community over? What policy can I hold myself accountable for? Excuse me, that's going to benefit others. And I think we really, with the amount of media that we have that's actually not controlled by these huge corporations and propaganda machines, we can right now get to a point to where if we as a general population decide that we're only going to vote for a politician if he signs an accord that he's going to act a certain way. For example, all of his finances are exposed, so we know exactly how him and his cronies are benefiting from it. That politician would have to choose to run on that platform and say, all right, I'm going to sacrifice the potential of me making hundreds of millions of dollars off of this high profile position of senator, governor, or whatever political position it is. I know that I could make myself and my family incredibly rich off of this. I'm going to choose not to. And here it is. Here's proof, because I'm not going to take anything above a certain amount. I'm going to be putting towards, XYZ, and they just show where they're putting all their additional funds, and they need to choose. And I think this is the most important part. They need to actively choose to live on a median wage for their community, because the only way that the people who we are voting for and who are supposed to be our public servants are going to be incentivized to make it best for everyone,
empathize with us,
is to actually be everyone, actually live in a home that a median wage can actually afford, eat the food that a median wage can actually afford, drive the cars that a median wage can actually afford, not go to Cancun during freezes, because you can't do that on a median wage, right?
Yeah.
And all of the sudden, if us as voters only voted for people, doesn't matter whether it's left or right, it could be an elephant, I don't give a shit. But if that person or elephant decides and agrees to, hey, I'm going to live off the median wage and here's proof, here's my open finances, then imagine what types of bills that Congress is going to be passing.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Getting there, it may be a pipe dream.
That's why I love you,
the only way,
utopian.
The only way is to get the Joe Rogans and the Tim Ferrisses and the everyone to actually get on board with that and say, hey guys, this truly would work. It's just we have to actually do it as a voter. And when you have 1,000 people to vote for, and you're going through that, you're in your line to go vote, and then it pops up on the screen, you don't know a fraction of those names. I don't. I'll know the ones at the very top, like, yeah, I recognize Biden, sure, whatever. But everyone else, you're just voting party line at that point. And you're not doing any good at all unless it's a few local people you might actually know. But if you have someone on there and you know that they're running on, like, say, let's call it a clear platform for a working title, and you know that person is committed to actually being a public servant instead of someone who is there because they're ambitious and they're wanting to get up on everyone else, because that's currently the incentive that we have, is everyone in Congress and the Senate, with very few exceptions, aren't there to help out the country. They're there to help out themselves and to prop up their own brand.
Oh yeah. I couldn't agree more with you. However, I have such little faith that we could get there anytime soon. If you think about the percentage of Americans during the last administration that were not only comfortable with Trump not providing his taxes, but were like grossly defending and fighting for him to not have to provide them. If they can be that manipulated that quickly, how the hell are we ever going to get anywhere close to getting to where people would value that over their toxic, fandom for politicians? Because that's what it's become when these people buy into, like when they are consuming the Fox and social media bullshit. Like that's what politicians has become. WWF, like fandom. I don't know of a way to get there anytime soon. You're right. That's where we should be. I just don't know how to get there. Like with people buying into the misinformation that leads to their fears and their anger that are just based on fucking make-believe, man. How do we get past that to where folks can actually look at the actual problems and the actual proposed solutions? Because we're so far away from that.
I don't think we are. I think if you're focusing on our generation, you're 100% right. Zero chance it's going to happen. But if we start that conversation,
it's better with our generation than like boomers. Like,
no, boomers are far gone, and we're already far gone as well. Like we're already in the fucking grave, Matt. We're old, gray bearded men. But no, the answer is Gen Z, and then whatever the hell the next generation is going to be is we start that conversation. And I think about growing up, driving in the car with my mom. They would listen to like Rush Limbaugh and Dr. Laura Schlesinger and all that. Yeah. And I listened to that. It affected me. They seemed very confident, and I thought that was just fact.
Same here. Same here.
And if we start driving with our kids in the car, listening to whatever podcast it is or whatever NPR or whatever, but we start talking about, hey, you know what? What if we started only voting for people who were willing to commit to living off a median wage? They're fine with shopping at Walmart or hand-me-downs. They're fine with driving a 10-year-old car because they actually give a shit. Mm-hmm. And we're going to demand that from our public servants going forward. I think that you're going to eventually get one. And then you might get two or three. And then what's their main priority going to be once they actually get into that level of whether it's a governor, whether it's Congress? I think Congress is going to be the main. It's going to be a lot harder to get a senator in there just because the money side of it. But if you get someone in there, their motivation at that point, their incentive is 100% to not only benefit people that are on their same socioeconomic level, but they're going to fucking expose all these other motherfuckers that are getting away with millions of dollars in deals.
That's what's tough. And backing up a hair, I do have faith that the generations below us are on the right track. I do. And a lot of my cynicism, a lot of what I'm upset about is that, damn it, I want this now. I want this in my lifetime, right? That's the main thing. And we're certainly not going to see it while these boomers are still in power, right? And then our generation is still, once we are, in charge, so to speak, I don't have a lot of faith in that.
Well,
but our kiddos are in a lot better place.
As you get older, what did I say about conservatism? That's why they say people turn conservative. It's because as you get older, all of a sudden you have the wealth. Yes. You have the way to decide how things are going. Oh, wait, I don't want things to change now because I finally have the power.
Have faith. I've seen multiple studies here recently that's not happening with our generation. You've seen that? It's not happening with our. We're not turning conservative, right? Part of that might just be because the politicians and that scene on the right is just so gross that people are just turned off by it, right? Like the whole like MAGA freaking thing, like it's such a turn off for our generation. It went too far. Oh God damn it, it did, dude.
It's hard to hide.
Oh my God. But then a lot of it is that, our generation does have more empathy, right? And so our generation, I have a little bit more faith in. our kiddos, I have way more faith in, but God damn it, I want this now. I want it sooner, right? I guess for me, I just want all of the just like in your face, so blatantly dumb politics and culture wars to like be done with. And it's God damn it, it's somehow getting worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And you know, you talked about, you know, growing up, you were exposed to like Rush and listening to that stuff. And that was, you know, I very much had a similar experience where I never felt I was like super conservative, but I certainly always leaned more conservative. And I think looking back, I think a lot of that was just, I bought into the hype of the attacks on the dumb liberals on the left, right? More than anything. And I was uneducated on what they were actually trying to do and what the right was actually trying to do. And in college, I actually somehow got a little bit even more conservative, because back then that was during Obama and all the attacks on Obama. And I was like, I totally bought into a lot of that dumb shit.
Well, you're surrounded by it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
You're going to Texas State.
I don't know. I mean, it's still a university, and most of my professors were liberal, and which I didn't mind, but I actually had a lot of great conversations with them. Like I would come to them with like, hey, I saw some shit on Fox yesterday, and you're over here talking about global warming, but they're over saying that's kind of bullshit. And they would actually have meaningful conversations with me, and that helped out a lot.
Mine didn't. I went to him and said, hey, do you really believe in this global warming thing? To one of my science professors. And he looked at me like, of course, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, and this just like blew me off. Like, are you an idiot? Of course. And this was like 15, 20 years ago. And at that time, I'm like, oh, well, okay. All right. Well, nice conversation.
Oh, I had one professor who I had 2 Bs at Texas State, 1 B as an undergraduate and 1 B in grad school. Same professor. And
no way.
And he was one of my favorite professors. Partly because we butted heads on a lot of shit, and he allowed me to have discussions both in class and afterwards where we would kind of, you know, have these debates. And he was very insightful, very smart guy. He was very liberal. And I would always challenge him with shit. And looking back, he was always right. I was such a little dumbass, but I took the challenges a little too far. and I had him for like 3 different classes over the years, and 2 of them were my only Bs at Texas State. It's like, God damn it. Or at least, only Bs in my program. I got another bad grade in math freshman year, but
plenty of Fs though.
yeah, Prairie View. I failed out of Prairie View. Let's say that. And then when I came out of college, I kind of thought I was a libertarian, and that, oh man, the government needs to stay out of my shit. At that point, I was kind of turned off by the politicians on the right, and still wasn't on board with the politicians on the left. And I was considering myself more on the libertarian side of things. And then when with the work that I do, which is dealing a lot with regulatory agencies and government agencies and Department of Defense and whatnot, I started seeing that, like, shit, man, the deep state, all these people, like the bloated government, these are all just people, man. And a lot of them are showing up to do a good job. Yeah, there's a lot of government employees out there that kind of suck, that just show up, just barely get by. There's a lot of those, but there's a lot of good folks in there. And it turns out that, you know, all this hate on the federal government was kind of like bullshit. I started picking up on that. And then, you know, I saw a funny, I don't know if it's called a meme or what, but it said something like, I used to consider myself libertarian, and then I took some psychedelics and realized that I have empathy and that people are just people and they don't deserve any less than I do. And although like that wasn't my exact experience, it was probably something along those lines. And I started like seeing like libertarian was kind of bullshit too. And then when fucking MAGA came along, that's when I completely abandoned the right and saw through all of their bullshit. Like at that point in time, I was like, both parties suck. Both parties are the same. And you know, the whole system's kind of fucked. And then at that point I was like, nope. The right is definitely far more fucked. And it kind of forced me to kind of, at least listen to the folks on the left to see, like, is there any hope? Are they going to do anything at least in response to this absurdity that's happening in office right now? Are they going to do anything? And then it turns out when your information about the folks on the left isn't coming from the right media and your conservative buddies around the water cooler, it turns out it's actually a completely different scenario over there. And yes, there is corruption. There's inefficiencies over there. And, there are corporate Democrats who are only in place up there because they are trying to suck that corporate teat and make their money while they're in office. There's a lot of that. But in my opinion, Jace, it not only are both parties not even nearly remotely the same right now in the past 6-8 years, the left are the only ones that are actually bringing forth solutions to our problems. We saw so much of that during the first 2 years of Biden's administration. So much that they put forth so much legislation, and actually under Trump, the House put through a lot of legislation that never even made it to vote, and it was very meaningful. But it kind of doesn't matter because they also knew that it wasn't even going to make it to vote. But in the first 2 years of Biden's administration, they put forth so much legislation that was absolutely geared towards helping out the people, American people. Sure, there's some pork in there. Absolutely. But they got a literal metric ton of solid legislation and funding for solutions to our problems. It absolutely happened, man. They made some really great progress. I don't know what the next 2 years are going to bring us, but it gave me a little bit of faith in our system. And now just this past week with the new session, I've lost all faith again. But it's been quite the ride for me in where I stand in politics and trying to figure out what's the best way to evaluate what these folks are doing up there. Because it all comes down to, can you trust who the hell you're listening to, right? Because you're not there in their office with them, right? And being in Texas, it's pretty hard to step outside of those conservative bubbles. We have Austin and San Marcos around here, a lot of like-minded folks, but other than that, it's pretty difficult for a lot of folks to get past that and see. I mean, you talk about folks that are in Congress who are actually who are only there to help the people. Fucking Bernie Sanders, dude. Like, I swear to God, every time I hear that man talk, I become more of a Bernie fan. That dude, and you look at his career, his entire fucking career, it's been nothing but fighting for the people, and that's it. And people like try to paint him as like some crazy socialist, but actually sit down and look at what the hell he has to say. It's like, no, man, that absolutely makes sense. We need that shit. And he gets, he gets shoved out by the corporate Democrats. So we need more people like him.
Yeah, I've actually heard this a lot the last year or so, that people see America as a place where you can really climb the socioeconomic ranks. And so by putting in more social positive change, it decreases that ability to shoot up, to rocket up and become one of the elite, right? So if you go to Europe,
high elite.
Yeah, become a millionaire,
multi-millionaire,
right? Yeah. And where in Europe, it's really comfy. You never have to worry about, you've got a safety net for you. And I've actually heard this from Europeans. They like that, but they kind of wish that there was a chance for them to climb the socioeconomic ranks better. Yeah. And they know that with the apprenticeship system specific to like Germany, that's just not an option. But you're going to be comfortable, and you're going to be able to live next to your neighbor, and you're going to be in the same socioeconomic system, and it's going to be comfortable. Where in the U.S., as my good buddy Wolfram, Wolfram said, you've got a lot of freedom in America, but you also have the freedom to suffer.
Yep.
But part of that is you do have at least a better opportunity to take some crazy risks. And if you're one of those, top percenters that can actually deal with it, and you get lucky on top of it, then you can make a fantastic, luxurious life for yourself in the US. But lots of people were born here and didn't sign up for that. That's the part that gives me pause and makes me realize, we do at least need to focus on base needs, something to where we're not having whole cities of Flint, Michigan poisoned. We need to make sure that, although I don't like the inefficiencies that the government brings when we just throw a bunch of money at them, we've shown through history that that's the only way that we're going to at least take care of the the basic majority of the population. And I'm not saying we need to get everyone, top of the line, everything, but basic drinking water, basic healthcare.
Yeah.
And if at that point we can still leave it open for people to truly have an amazing chance to climb up socioeconomically,
absolutely have that
leave it a
opportunity
battleground. But I mean, unless we make an immigration policy to where if you're born here and you don't want to deal with the incredibly competitive nature of living in the US, you have an option to go to Europe or somewhere else. Maybe an exchange program where we're like,
I like that idea.
Oh wait, you just want a relaxed, healthy lifestyle. You don't want to deal with the competitive nature of a meritocracy. All right. Yeah. Hey, Germany, you got someone that wants to come over here and roll the dice with the rest of us crazy Americans? All right, let's do it.
I would love that, man.
You don't worry about, people having guns on the street. It's kind of fun.
Sign me up for Southern Spain exchange, man. I would love that. Yeah, so in the majority of those Western European countries, it's almost difficult to not be middle class. Like you got to really kind of have really bad luck or make some really bad decisions to be like poor over there. It's the middle class that's what it is. I mean, the middle class is so large over there. Whereas over here, our that wealth gap is now again, drastically expanding to where, old Teddy Roosevelt's efforts in 1900, closed that gap. And then World War II closed it even more and created just such this massive middle class here in America. And then freaking so many of Americans got fooled by Reaganomic trickle down bullshit. And since then that wealth gap is just getting so, the rate of expansion is just absurd and it's not getting any better, but we can still have a solid middle class, a social safety net, and still have opportunity to become wealthy. Maybe a slightly less opportunity for folks to become billionaires or multimillionaires, whatever. Millionaire. Yeah. Imagine how much better our society would be, how much more opportunity individuals would have to gain wealth if, for example, our healthcare system wasn't tied to our employer. That is such bullshit. How many Americans have bought into the right's freaking complete asinine propaganda, in my opinion, that it's totally cool for our healthcare to be tied to our employment. Imagine if everyone just had paid their taxes to get healthcare and we could go and seek employment or capitalistic ventures however we see fit. And we weren't terrified of going in crippling debt over not having insurance in between jobs or while starting up a small business, right? That is opportunity for growth that we are stunting ourselves on just because of all the wrong lobbyists up there from the healthcare system.
I just think that comes down to, that's just one way to do it. And it's just different. It's going to benefit some and it's going to hurt others. It's going to benefit those who are more willing to take risk. It comes down to my scenario of exchanges. Some people, they'd rather have it this way because they don't mind taking the risk of getting off of a standard insurance. And those people are going to benefit hugely from focusing all their assets on building a business, and damned be my health. But it could go poorly from them, but at least they have that option. That's the freedom that we talk about.
But that particular brand of freedom limits our pool of potential innovators out there.
But it's going to definitely concentrate the people who are willing to take those risks.
But it means that we're only getting innovation out of folks either with money or folks that have the balls to take that risk. And we're losing out on an entire pool of people who could be innovating and pushing society forward, but they just don't have it in them to put their family at risk by being out of healthcare for a while. Right. Like, to me, it's like,
we still have healthcare if you don't have a job. You just have to pay for it out of pocket, and it costs a lot more. It doesn't cost a lot more. I'm speaking from experience.
Oh yeah.
This is what I've lived through over the last few years. I've made this decision to self insure myself. I had savings to where I was able to, if something popped up, be able to pay for a procedure. Thank goodness I didn't have to do anything major. We had some small medical expenditures. And now I've even chosen, instead of going to the natural or the regular low deductible route, I've decided to just do HSA with the high deductible. So $6,000 each year, I'm potentially going to have to pay out of pocket, which isn't a small amount until you start looking at normal insurances, which the premiums alone are 20, 30,000, right? So we do have these options where in a socialized healthcare system, you have zero option. You're going to get taxed the same amount as everyone else, and you're going to get the same healthcare, period. Yeah, you can get a separate private insurance if you're really rich and go to private doctors or pay for private stuff. But for the majority of us, they don't have an option. And so in America, yeah, it may not be a great system for some people's perspective, but it does allow people who are willing to put in the time to learn the system and be able to work around it to what better suits them. And so again, it goes back to Wolfram's comment. There is way more freedom here, and it can benefit you greatly if you put in the time and the effort to learn about it and manipulate the system to your benefit. Same with the tax system. And so,
let's hold this back though. It's so holding us back. It's literally excluding so much of our population from whether it's innovation or capitalistic ventures, or just progress in general. It's holding us back. You're only allowing a certain character type of person to be in those situations. And I think if you cost benefit analysis would show that, hey, even though you are having to pay your taxes and you never have to go to the doctor for socialized healthcare, you don't see those benefits directly. You are still seeing the benefits of that from society. Your community, society at large, is a better place for it. And it's worth it to pay those taxes, not just worth it to be from being, empathetic from those people who are in bad spot from their health wise, and you're contributing to it. Not just like that, but you literally will have a better quality community when you have folks under a social safety net like that. And that expands all the way out from the quality of life in your community out to, like I was saying, innovation, folks being in a position where they can step out and try new things. Otherwise it's just a bunch of fucking indentured servitude, man. It's hard to get out of that. It's so hard to get out of that. That one in particular to me always just really pisses me off that so many people are comfortable with that. It doesn't make any sense. I think I was telling you the other day, it was funny, like what nationalized, not nationalized healthcare, but
single payer, or
just Medicare for all is so complicated that only 32 of the 33 developed nations have been able to figure it out. Like it's like everyone else has it. The rest of the developed world has it. And the only reason, it's so simple, the only reason that we don't have it is because we're allowing folks to manipulate us into thinking that there's something bad with having a social safety net in place.
Well, it comes down to there's billions, if not trillions of dollars going through the insurance companies, and they're going to spend a percentage of those revenues to convince people to not let them get rid of that power.
Yep.
It's going to be a hard fucking fight to get them to give that up.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen anytime soon until we get, maybe our next generation will, but
until we get politicians to run on a clear platform. But
yeah. Start slapping those stickers on cars, man. You're onto something there. Here's a question for you. In my line of work every day, I see the ill effects of environmental contamination on our society. People dying of cancer. Although cancer rates or I guess cancer survivorship is getting better, right?
Yeah.
We're getting better at treating it.
Dropped 33% since 1991.
I think I saw that. Yeah. That's good.
And they're coming up with vaccines now.
Yeah. What's that? Well, we've had that. We had that for like is
cancer
HPV,
vaccines?
Is HPV?
That's a virus.
What is?
It's a virus that can cause.
That's what I was
increases
thinking.
your chances of cervical cancer.
Cervical cancer. Yes. So okay. Yeah, you're right. So that's technically for a virus that causes cancer. Yeah, but
they're going into clinical trials of a
vaccine
that actually stops cancer cells, which I don't know how that works, but
that's above my pay grade. I have no idea how that works. But that's promising. That's good. However, we are still faced with a very large cancer problem due to our environment, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we consume, the stuff that we're surrounded by. We're getting better at fucking like lead paint and stuff and asbestos. God damn, is it not good? How lucky, let's just take a moment right quick to say how lucky are we that we were able to fucking get rid of using lead and asbestos before all this culture war shit happened, right?
No doubt.
Imagine right now people on the right like, fuck you, man. This is my goddamn asbestos, right? We are so fortunate that we were able to make a lot of progress before this culture war bullshit. But
now we're fighting over gas stoves.
oh my God, I haven't clicked one of those links yet, man. I'm like, I don't have it in me. It is so depressing.
Apparently there's some pretty damning evidence against having a gas stove in your home that's causing cancer. If you raise a kid in a gas stove home, which the majority of the world for years are just using gas stoves, like Brazil, that's all they have. Most of Europe, France, which is kind of one of the leaders in the social realms as far as taking care of their populace. I noticed that they've already made the move to start moving away from gas stoves. They're using what is it? Induction? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Where you can actually touch the top of the stove with your hand and it doesn't burn you, but you put a specific type of magnetically or like, I don't know how it works. I'm an idiot, but we were staying in Paris and we couldn't figure out how to cook food. We didn't realize. We're like, the stove's not working.
That's just another, I've been seeing that in like feeds lately. And I'm like, I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me to fucking get into that debate, man.
Do you guys have a gas stove?
No, we have
you don't really have to worry about it.
Yeah, no, but it's almost, it reminds me of when I was in college, I was watching Glenn Beck on TV and I watched one of his, he'd get up in front of a chalkboard, do his fucking stupid rants. And he was going off on phasing out incandescent bulbs for LED. And his fucking tirade on it, I can't believe we as a society are so stupid that we're going to phase out incandescent bulbs. I am going, if Californians and those liberals take away our incandescent bulbs, I'm going to spend my retirement savings on buying every fucking incandescent bulb I can get my hands on.
What was his reasoning?
I don't fucking know, dude. I don't. It's probably, someone's
makes no sense.
It makes no sense, dude. Someone's probably paying him. It's just the people on the left are telling him telling the world that's what we should be doing, so therefore it must be wrong, and he fought back, right? You got to own the libs, man. And I remember thinking that, and he was like, LEDs are never going to work. They're so stupid, they're so small, and it's like,
now it's the only light that we use. I fucking
love LEDs, man. And I remember at the time almost like not buying into it, but thinking like, he's probably got a point. I kind of like my incandescent bulbs. He's probably got a point. No one should be telling me what to do. Like I should at least have the right to do that. But
I should have a right to spend 5 times the amount of electricity to light my home. Like, what's the?
And that was like kind of more my libertarian days, right? And so, so that poses a question, right? Our right to do something, our right to own incandescent bulbs, or our right to have a gas stove or whatever. Do you think in America we should have the right to a clean environment? Should we as an individual and as a society have a constitutional amendment, a right to clean drinking water, a right to clean food and clean air? It's a question I've thought about for a long time. I am not a constitutionalist, but to me, kind of makes sense that we should be asking that question, because for far too long, we've allowed corporations to kill us, straight kill us. If you think about how many millions and millions of Americans have died from cancer, how many millions have been hospitalized, have been sick from breathing in poor quality air, smog, asthma, throat cancer from drinking contaminated water, pancreatic cancer from eating contaminated food. Should we not have a right, constitutional right, that if I wanted to live away from society and I owned a little piece of property out in the middle of nowhere, I had a stream running through it that I can get my water from, or I have a well that I can get groundwater run from to drink, and I want to grow my own food, vegetables, livestock, and not participate in society. Should I have the right to clean air coming across my property? If there's a factory 20 miles upgrading of me. Do I have the right to have clean air and have them not pollute the quality of my air on my property? Do I have the right to clean groundwater and clean drinking water from their pollution, either into the surface water or to the groundwater? Do I have the right to be able to eat my food that I grow and not have particulate matter and other chemicals drop out of the air coming from their smokestacks onto my livestock and my vegetables? I think we should have that right. Why should that not be ingrained in the Constitution? It's an honest question. Is that fucking radical?
I think that'd be pretty radical 100 years ago, because you had to work for that. You had to, toil and struggle for that to get it. But I think that goes on to the throwing it onto hard mode of, I think we've gotten to a point in society where we should expect that.
I think it should be ingrained in the Constitution. I think that there should be no bullshit about it where whatever administration or whatever Congress or whoever the leader of the EPA is, be damned. It shouldn't matter about those politics. I think that what matters is that we should all have full stop a clean environment, clean air, clean water. Why not? I'm not a constitutionalist. I don't know how many cans of worms that opens up, but I think it should be in there.
Well, on that note, we'll let people think about that. I appreciate your time coming on, prepared with giving us a little bit more of a history lesson than I'd expect a geologist.
Yeah.
I don't know you're a historian as well, but it was very informative. It was something that I think everyone should know, or at least understand how it came about, and the idea that we have media that unfortunately has shown its true head of pretty much just parroting whatever their sponsors are paying them to say is unfortunate. So more media that's like this, that at least is an open, honest conversation, regardless if there's information missing. It's at least a base to where people can start asking questions of what are the motivations of some of these changes that we're making? Why would we? What could possibly incentivize us to change a law or try to introduce a specific bill? And we need to start asking those questions. And then if we don't know the answers, start digging from as many sources as possible. Because as we've seen, there's a lot of organizations, think tanks, experts in air quotes that really are only there because they have some very deep pocketed people wanting them to claim that these experts are saying X, Y, Z because of no other reason other than to convince the population that it's, whether it's safe or that they need it. So
yeah,
we're all victims of it. We're all part of the problem as well. I mean, we've benefited from a lot of this stuff. We need to recognize that. We need to recognize how we're part of the problem and take those steps, but we also need to make sure that we're holding our politicians accountable so we can hold these organizations that have a ton of power and will continue to have power, but expose as much as we can. So moving forward, Gen Z is not going to be in the same situation as our boomers.
That'd be nice.
Sorry, boomers. Nice. Not sorry, picking on you, but
sorry, not sorry, boomers, man. Sorry, not sorry, boomers. No.
The millennials eating their avocado toast.
Thanks for a great childhood, boomers, but adulthood under falling up after y'all sucks.
What were boomers good at? Just having a lot of babies. They were good at not having great TV, so they fucked a lot. Yeah. No, I love my parents. They did an amazing job for the landscape that they were put into, able to keep us alive and actually able to have an open mind and analytical thinking skills. I can't thank them enough.
Yeah.
Hopefully we take the baton and hand it off without it being too beat up.
Yeah, my kids are pretty level-headed. They're discussing things that I didn't even consider until college. So I think we're on the right track.
Matt, thank you so much, man. Yeah, we'll continue to have our debates back and forth. I'm always right. You're always wrong.
Never.
I am Woodstock.